Hi everyone, and welcome to this new video. Today we're going to be making a dress from the 1947 film Sea of Grass. The film was directed by Elia Kazan. The film starred Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy, and the costumes were designed by Walter Plunkett. Now, an interesting fact about this film is that Elia Kazan hated the costumes that were designed by Plunkett. He thought they didn't fit in with the story at all. But you have to remember that the character that Katharine Hepburn was playing was a rich young woman from St. Louis who had all of her clothing made for her. So the dresses that you see her wearing when she moves out west are the clothes that a rich young woman thought she would need to live in that sort of climate and area. So perhaps they were right, but not exactly what Kazan thought that they should be. We are actually able to trace the history of this dress. As I said, it was made in 1947 for Katharine Hepburn. It obviously gets reused several times. I've yet to find a film in which it appears, but it resurfaces again in a photograph for the Great MGM auction of 1970. And in this photograph, you can already see the alterations that have taken place. The sleeves have been shortened, the apron drape has been redraped, so there are very obvious drapings going across the front. And green bows have been added to the front of a dress instead of the flowers. At some point after this, it ends up in the collection of Gene London, in his costume collection. And now the costume resides at the Katharine Hepburn Museum. And I would like to thank them very much for actually sending me photographs of the dress that I was able to use to work with to reproduce this gown. I would like to thank my patrons for their continued support of this channel. Their contributions really help with what I can produce for you to watch. And if you would like to join Patreon, I will leave a link in the description below. Or if you don't want to do that and just want to leave a one-off thanks, you can click the Super Thanks tab below the screen. So let's get into making this dress, and I'll see you at the end with the finished product. I start by cutting out the fronts of the dress in white cotton. These are then sewn together. I then cut out the tops of the base layer in a flesh-coloured organza. These are then attached to the white cotton fronts. Here, you see me draping the broderie anglaise front over the base white cotton layer. I then lay this out on the fabric and cut the other side. I then sew the centre front seam. Next, I cut out the rest of the panels for the dress in the white cotton and the broderie anglaise. So the way I'm constructing this dress is that I have cut into the broderie anglaise layer into the seam allowance at the point where the two layers of the dress splits, so that I can then sew in a continuous seam all the way down to the hem of the cotton layer, and then I'll go back in and seam up the broderie anglaise layer. So then everything is in one piece at the top, and then the skirt and the apron are separate layers. Once the panels are sewed together, I then sew the hem around the base layer of the dress. Then I cut out the skirt panels and sew these together. I next cut out and sew up the sleeves. and then I cut out the sleeve flounces in the broderie anglaise. I then sew on the broderie anglaise trim around the edge of the flounce. For the sleeve frills, I use the scallop stitch on my machine to create a decorative edge. I gather these up and then sew them onto a band. Here you see me cutting out the waterfall drapes for the back of the dress. I cut down more of the trimming to the correct size. This is then sewn all around the edge of the waterfall drape. The bow is made from a large rectangle of fabric. I sew yet more edging all around the edge of the bow. The bow is then gathered through the centre. I then sew by hand a piece of fabric around the bow to create the knot. Here's the finished dress. I have to say, I think this is one of my most favourite things I've actually made on this channel. I just love how simple it is, how elegant it looks. It's a very clever design. When I was making it, it made me think of those white dresses that you see in the paintings of James Tissot, of the ladies on the decks of boats and sitting on sofas, etc. I found it really interesting making this period of costume. It's not something I do a lot. So if there's anything else you'd like to see me make in this period, please leave me a message below in the comments, and maybe it'll be something that I look into. Thank you again for watching, and I look forward to seeing you all next time with a new video.